And what's up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of Historic Hot Laps. Listen, have you ever stopped to think about how one race car driver may have saved your life without you ever even knowing his name? This week, we're telling the incredible story of John Fitch, Le Mans winner, fighter pilot, one of the most influential innovators in automotive safety history. His greatest achievement didn't happen on the racetrack, it happened on the highways that we drive today. But first, what a week it was in motorsports. You had Charles Leclerc remind the world that Ferrari isn't finished yet with a brilliant victory at Silverstone. Arrow McLaren sent a message to the rest of IndyCar paddock with dominant 1-2 finish at Mid-Ohio, just days after shaking up the series as one of the biggest driver announcements in recent history. And NASCAR's return to Chicagoland Speedway proved exactly why so many fans have been asking for this track to come back. Brandon Jones battled Chase Elliott to finish on Saturday, while Chase Briscoe and Joe Gibbs Racing sweep on Sunday is one of the best intermediate track races we've seen in years. We'll also break down the latest silly season news from IndyCar, including Scott Dixon's blockbuster move, Arrow McLaren's official 2027 lineup, what it means for the future of the series. So buckle up. We've got F1, we've got IndyCar, NASCAR, one of the greatest untold stories in motorsports history. Plenty of opinions along the way. This is the Historic Hot Laps. Let's get going. All right, the British Grand Prix. It's always been a crown jewel event on the Formula One calendar every year. There's just something special about Silverstone. It's the history, the atmosphere, the passionate fans. This is where F1 held its very first World Championship race back in 1950. This is a circuit that has seen legends like Fangio, Clark, Senna, Schumacher, Hamilton, Verstappen. All these guys create unforgettable moments. And the 2026 British Grand Prix added yet another chapter to that history because after a difficult stretch of races, Charles Leclerc finally found his way back to the top step of the podium. And not only did he win, he did it in such a dramatic fashion. Coming into Silverstone, things had not been easy for Leclerc. The Ferrari driver had endured a rough stretch of the season, back-to-back retirements in Monaco and Barcelona, disappointing result in Austria after starting from a much stronger position than he finished in, and heading into the British Grand Prix weekend, even Leclerc himself admitted he wasn't overly optimistic about his chances. The reason is the characteristics of Silverstone. You've got long straights, high-speed corners, a layout that traditionally rewards strong aerodynamic efficiency and straight-line performance, and on paper, it wasn't expected to be Ferrari's strongest track. But that's why we watch racing, right? Because sometimes the races that look predictable on paper become anything but predictable once the lights go out. Ferrari actually showed early signs of life during the weekend. Lewis Hamilton topped free practice 1. Ferrari looked competitive during the sprint qualifying race. And both Ferrari drivers looked like they had something much better underneath them than many had expected. Saturday's qualifying was especially important. Charles Leclerc qualified second, Lewis Hamilton qualified third, and suddenly Ferrari had put both cars right in the top of the fight. They were sitting between the two Mercedes cars and looked like a genuine contender for the race. The big question came, though, could Ferrari convert speed into a result on Sunday? And that answer came pretty quickly when the Grand Prix started. Both Ferraris launched well, but it was Leclerc who immediately put himself in position. He took the lead early and showed something we haven't always seen from Ferrari recently, and that's control. The Ferrari wasn't just fast, it was consistent. Leclerc looked comfortable. He managed the pace, he managed his tires. Most importantly, he managed the pressure because behind him was a very fast Mercedes team. The biggest threat came from Kimi Antonelli, and this weekend was really a tale of two races for the young Mercedes driver because before everything went wrong on Sunday afternoon for him, Antonelli looked like the future superstar, and honestly, he reminded everyone why Mercedes has so much confidence in him. The sprint weekend belonged to Antonelli. After narrowly missing the sprint pole to Lewis Hamilton, Antonelli dominated the sprint race itself. He chased down the Ferrari, he made the pass, and he controlled the rest of the event to claim his first ever sprint victory. Then in qualifying, he backed the performance up. Antonelli put Mercedes on the pole for the Grand Prix on Sunday. That is not something you accidentally do. That's definitely a statement from the young driver. But the Grand Prix itself didn't start the way Antonelli had hoped. When the lights went out, both Ferraris got him real quick. He dropped down the order. But what impressed me was how patient he was. A young driver in that position can panic, they can force mistakes, they can destroy their tires trying to recover with, the first few laps. Antonelli didn't do that. He settled in, he stayed very close, and eventually worked his way back past Lewis Hamilton. And that was a big moment because it's not easy to make a move where he made it on that track. It takes confidence, it takes commitment, and Antonelli showed both of those things. The frustrating part for Mercedes was Antonelli appeared to have the pace to win the race. After Leclerc's pit stop, Antonelli stayed out longer to try to do the overcut strategy. The strategy was working. The gap came down. And at one point, Antonelli was only about 3 seconds behind Leclerc. The race looked like it was settling up for a final battle, and then the car failed him. Antonelli reported an issue with the car. The problem ended up being a damaged wheel shield. That issue affected the car's handling. Mercedes tried to repair it, but the damage was done. Antonelli had to make additional stops. He dropped all the way to the back, and what looked like a possible victory turned into a 15th place finish, a brutal ending outside the points for him, because sometimes racing is just like that, right? You can do everything right, you can have the fastest car, you can put yourself in position, and one mechanical issue changes everything. Meanwhile, Leclerc was able to capitalize, and after everything Ferrari had been through recently, this victory definitely mattered. This wasn't just another win, this was a reset, a reminder, a confidence boost. For Leclerc, this is his 9th career Formula One victory, and his first victory since 2024, but more importantly, it was proof that Ferrari still has the ability to fight for a win. On the other side of Ferrari garage was Lewis Hamilton. For Hamilton, Silverstone's always going to be an emotional place. 7-time world champion, a British racing icon, home track for him, returning to Ferrari and racing in the front of his home crowd. The expectations are always going to be enormous for him, and the weekend delivered plenty of drama. Hamilton received a 5-second penalty for a false start. Later in the race, he looked positioned for a second-place finish, but a late safety car changed everything for that. Hamilton chose to pit, George Russell stayed out, and that decision handed Russell second place. Hamilton still finished on the podium, but you could feel that there was some disappointment there. This was a race where Hamilton had a legitimate chance to finish runner-up in front of his home fans. Instead, strategy cost him that opportunity. Then there came the Max Verstappen situation, and this is probably the biggest storyline for Red Bull. Because Verstappen's weekend was already difficult, the Red Bull lacked the balance he wanted, the car struggled with pace, then late in the race while running with podium position, disaster struck. Verstappen spun in Stowe corner, his car ended up in the gravel, brought out a late safety car, and the frustrating part is, according to Verstappen, this wasn't just a random mistake. He blamed the recurring rear wing issue they've had over there, the same type of issue that affected him earlier in Austria. His comment afterward was basically that this situation is becoming dangerous. That's something Red Bull absolutely has to address, because when a driver of Verstappen's caliber says there's a problem affecting confidence and safety, especially, like I said, from that driver, you need to listen. And finally, let's talk about McLaren real quick, because this weekend was definitely interesting for them. The team arrived at Silverstone celebrating its history with a special livery honoring Bruce McLaren's 1966 British Grand Prix car. But on track, things weren't quite as dominant as expected. Lando Norris finished 4th. Oscar Piastri finished outside the points after contact forced him into some repairs. And Norris himself admitted the car just didn't feel right. And that's a fascinating development, because McLaren has looked incredibly strong as of late. But Silverstone showed the gap between the top teams, and that gap may be smaller than expected. So, what's the biggest takeaway from F1 this weekend? Well, for me, is that Ferrari is still alive. The last few races, the conversation has been about Mercedes and McLaren, Red Bull. Ferrari's starting to become more of an afterthought. Not anymore. They're backing things up. Charles Leclerc needed this victory. Ferrari needed a victory. And Formula One is better when Ferrari is competitive, because love 'em or hate 'em, the sport needs the Scuderia fighting for the front. Championship picture still remains with Kimi Antonelli as the leader, but George Russell dramatically closed the gap this week. A weekend that looked like it could extend Antonelli's advantage ended with Russell cutting into the championship lead. And with Mercedes, Ferrari, Red Bull, and McLaren all showing different strengths, the Formula One season is far from settled. Silverstone delivered exactly what the fans wanted: drama, unexpected results, and a reminder that nothing is guaranteed in Formula One. All right, we just finished talking about Formula One's British Grand Prix, where Charles Leclerc returned to victory lane, and Ferrari reminded everyone they're still a force in Formula One. Now, as we turn our attention back to America, let's talk about the IndyCar Series, and they're putting on one of the best races of the season at the most challenging track on the calendar, the Honda Indy 200 at Mid-Ohio, presented by the 2027 CR-V Hybrid, gave fans everything you wanted from a road course. Just like Silverstone, we're talking strategy, aggressive driving, teammates racing each other for the win, championship implications, and most importantly, drivers pushing the limits. The Mid-Ohio Sports Car course has always been one of those tracks that separates the good from the great. It is technical, it is narrow, passing opportunities are limited, mistakes are punished, and because of that, drivers have to be patient. But on Sunday, most of that patience went out the window, because Arrow McLaren had two cars fighting for one trophy, and neither driver was willing to give an inch. Let's just start with the biggest story of the day. Pato Award winning the Honda Indy 200 at Mid-Ohio, but the bigger story might be is how he won it, because this wasn't just a victory, this was a statement. Arrow McLaren finished first and second, with Award taking the checkered flag ahead of teammate Christian Lundgaard, and it was the first ever 1-2 finish for Arrow McLaren in the IndyCar Series race, and that is a massive accomplishment for this organization as a whole. For years, Arrow McLaren has been viewed as a team with potential to challenge the established powers of IndyCar. They have the speed, they have the talent, they've had one of the most passionate fan bases in the series, but finding that complete weekend where everything comes together has sometimes been a challenge for them. Mid-Ohio was that weekend. And what makes it even more impressive is that this wasn't just a case of one driver dominating while another followed. No, this was a genuine fight. This was a teammate situation battling to win, and honestly, this is what every team owner wants to see. You want to see two cars capable of winning. You want to see drivers who believe they belong at the front. And you want to see your team fighting for championships and trophies. Only difficult part is sometimes those two drivers have to fight each other. That's exactly what happened. The defining moment of the race came on lap 42 when Christian Lundgaard was leading, but exiting turn 2, Lundgaard drifted slightly wide and Pato O'Ward saw the opening. This is where the best drivers separate themselves because the opportunity might only exist for half a second. You either commit or you lose it. And we all know how Pato O'Ward's going to take that. He's going to commit. He squared the corner, he got the run, and suddenly the two Arrow McLaren cars were fighting each other for the lead. Then came turn 4, and this was the moment everyone was talking about. Turn 4 is one of the best passing opportunities in Mid-Ohio, but passing there is still not an easy feat. O'Ward and Lundgaard entered the corner side by side. The cars were inches apart. When they exited, there was a little bit of contact. Not a wreck, not a dirty move, but definitely hard racing. O'Ward used the bumper, he leaned on his teammate, he made sure that Lundgaard knew he was there, and honestly, that's classic IndyCar. There have been plenty of famous moments in IndyCar history where teammates have had to race each other aggressively, and this reminded me of the 2017 battle between Joseph Newgarden and Simon Pagenaud at Gateway. That night, Newgarden wasn't afraid to use his car, he wasn't afraid to make the pass happen, and eventually he won the race. O'Ward did a similar thing at Mid-Ohio. He saw an opportunity against his teammate, he took it, and he drove away with the victory. Now the important question everyone asks, was it too aggressive? And honestly, I don't think so, and here's why. There's a difference between being aggressive and being reckless. Reckless is putting your teammate into the wall. Reckless is making a move with no chance of success. Reckless is destroying both cars because you only care about winning. And that wasn't happening here. O'Ward and Lundgaard, they raced each other very hard. They bumped, they fought, they made each other earn it. But both cars finished the race, and at the end of the day, that's what you want to see. For Pato O'Ward, this was just another reminder of why he's considered one of the biggest talents in IndyCar. His speed has never been the question. Everyone knows Pato can drive. The question has always been consistency. Can he put together a complete weekend? Can he minimize his mistakes? And can he finish races when he has the pace to win? Well, Mid-Ohio was exactly that type of performance. He was fast, he was aggressive, he was smart. When the opportunity came, he took it. There's also something interesting about Pato's situation moving forward. We just talked earlier in the episode about massive changes coming to this 2027 silly season. With Arrow McLaren now building a championship caliber lineup, the expectations are going to change, and we're going to cover that more here in a little bit in the show. But Pato is no longer the young star just trying to prove he belongs. He's becoming the leader of the IndyCar premier organization over there at McLaren, and performances like Mid-Ohio are exactly why. So let's talk about Christian Lundgaard for a second, because even though Lundgaard didn't win, I think it was another huge weekend for him, because losing a race like this can sometimes tell you more about a driver than winning. Lundgaard had the pace, he had the strategy, he put himself in a good position, and when his teammate came after him, he fought back. He didn't disappear, he didn't back down, he just raced. And this is also why Christian Lundgaard has become such an interesting name in the IndyCar paddock, because he is still young, he's proven he can win, and he has shown qualifying speed, he has shown pace, and now he consistently shows he belongs to the elite drivers of the series. With the silly season already heating up, performances like this only increase his value in the paddock. And while Arrow McLaren celebrated, championship leader Alex Palou quietly did what championship drivers do, and he survived. Palou placed 5th in that race. It wasn't a dominant weekend we've been accustomed to seeing for him, but it was definitely another strong points day. And those are the weekends that win championships, right? You don't have to win every race. You just have to avoid disasters. That what makes Palou so difficult to beat. When he has the best car, he wins. When he doesn't have the best car, he still finishes in top 5, top 3. And that's championship level consistency. There are also several drivers who deserve attention from this race. You had Kyle Kirkwood continuing his strong season with a podium finish for Andretti Global. Kirkwood has become one of the most improved drivers in IndyCar, and the raw talent is definitely there. But now we're seeing the consistency. Let me talk about Rinus VeeKay for a second, because driving Juncos Hollinger Racing, VeeKay was a legitimate threat throughout the weekend. He ultimately finished just outside the podium, but his performance showed the progress that the organization continues to make. Scott Dixon had an interesting afternoon. The veteran had contact with Alexander Rossi, which damaged his front wing, and once again, this shows how difficult it is to maintain championship form. Even the best drivers need things to go their way. Dixon is still one of the smartest racers in the world, but when you lose track position in a place like Mid-Ohio, recovery is difficult to almost impossible. Another thing, too, the rookie battle also had some interesting developments. You had Dennis Hogger and Kyle Collette. They had contact in turn 4. Collette was pushed off the track and recovered to finish in 11th place. That result helped him close the Rookie of the Year gap. With 7 races remaining, the rookie battle remains very much alive in IndyCar. So final thoughts from Mid-Ohio. Well, for me, Mid-Ohio was one of the most important races of the IndyCar season. It's not my favorite race to watch by any means, and it's not because of the championship points, it's not because of the major upset, but because it showed something important, and that's what teams can stride. You had Arrow McLaren getting it done. They're no longer just a team with potential. They're winning again. They're putting multiple cars at the front. They're creating a type of internal competition that the championship team needs. They've got all this drama with the silly season stuff happening. The biggest question now is whether they can maintain the momentum. It'll be very interesting after all the driver lineup announcements what will happen here moving forward. But winning one race is very difficult. Building a championship organization is much harder. The IndyCar season now takes a short break. We'll be back with the Music City Grand Prix at Nashville in a couple weeks. And after what we saw at Mid-Ohio, that race has a lot to live up to. All right, from road courses and open wheel racing, let's head to Illinois because NASCAR made a long-awaited return to one of its most popular intermediate tracks. Chicagoland Speedway is back. Both the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series and NASCAR Cup Series delivered completely different but equally entertaining races. So let's just dive right into it. Let's talk about it. When the checkered flag flew at Chicagoland for the O'Reilly Series, Brandon Jones was the one celebrating in victory lane. The Joe Gibbs Racing driver took the number 20 Toyota to victory after a thrilling overtime finish. And this wasn't an easy win. This was definitely earned. Jones had to battle through changing conditions, a long night, the final restart against one of the best drivers in NASCAR because sitting next to him on the front row, the final restart was none other than Cup Series champion Chase Elliott. The race was already a challenge before the green flag even dropped. Weather played a major role throughout the weekend. Rain delays affected the schedule all weekend long. Qualifying was canceled. Instead of traditional qualifying, the startup was determined using NASCAR's rulebook, and practice was definitely impacted as well. This put Connor Zilisch on the pole, and early on, Zilisch looked like he belonged there. The story of Connor Zilisch's night is honestly one of the most impressive parts of this race. The young driver started from the pole, dominated the opening stage. He led the first stage wire to wire. He looked comfortable, he looked fast, and then things started to go wrong. During a caution, that number 1 JR Motorsports Chevrolet ran out of fuel, and that forced him to fall deep into the field. The driver who had dominated the opening portion of the race suddenly restarted stage 2 all the way back in 26th. For many drivers, this is where the night falls apart, but not for Zilisch. He fought his way back. By the end of stage 2, he was back up in the top 10. Then bad luck continued. Zilisch made contact with the outside wall. A tire issue sent him backwards again. Later, he spun, and every single time he recovered. 3 separate times the driver had to fight his way back through the field. Somehow, he still finished 10th. That's the kind of performance that tells you more about the driver than simple top 5 finish, because speed is important, but resilience is what separates the future stars in NASCAR. And Connor Zilisch continues to show that he has both. Now let's talk about Chase Elliott for a second, because this was a great example of why Cup Series experiments matter. Elliott entered the race and immediately took one of the strongest cars to the front of the field. The 2020 Cup Series champion showed the speed and racecraft that made him one of the NASCAR's biggest stars. He led 78 laps. He controlled a large portion of the race. When the final restart came, he had a legitimate chance to win. The race went into overtime. The restart was exactly what you want from NASCAR. Jones and Elliott lined side by side. 2 talented drivers, 2 different organizations shooting for 1 trophy. For the first 2 corners, neither of them gave an inch. They raced side by side through turns 1 and 2, but then turning into 3 on the final lap, Jones got the advantage. Elliott tried everything he could. He moved to the high side. He searched for grips. He tried to build momentum, but Jones just had positioned perfectly, and he blocked the lane, controlled the exit. When they reached the finish line, Brandon Jones beat Chase Elliott by 0.171 seconds. That's the kind of finish NASCAR fans can hope for. After the race, Elliott gave full credit to Jones, and honestly, that's what you want to see. There was disappointment, of course. Nobody wants to lose a race that close, but Elliott recognized what had happened. Jones executed when it mattered most. For Brandon Jones, this victory means a lot because 2026 has not been much of a good thing for him. It's been a big roller coaster. It's been flashes of success, but recently the team has been searching for momentum. Jones admitted afterward the team had been in a bit of a rut, so to take this historic track, a dramatic finish against the Cup Series champion, and get the win, this is exactly the type of thing that can change someone's season. I think this is a bigger reminder about Brandon Jones because sometimes drivers get labeled too quickly. They get defined by one bad stretch. They get defined by expectations, but racing is a confidence sport. When things start clicking, everything changes. A win like this can completely reset a team's mindset. Another driver who had an impressive night was Justin Allgaier. Allgaier didn't win. He didn't lead the most laps, but once again, he showed why he was one of the most consistent drivers in the series. He finished 6th, and most importantly, he left Chicagoland with a massive championship points advantage. Allgaier continues to be the benchmark for consistency in the sport. He rarely has disastrous races. He's always around the front, and when the playoffs arrive, those are the drivers you have to beat. One of the more impressive statistics from Chicagoland is JR Motorsports as a whole, with Chase Elliott, Justin Allgaier, Connor Zilisch all finishing in the top 10. JR Motorsports extended its streak of placing at least one car in the top 10 to 77 consecutive races, and that's an incredible level of consistency. It speaks to that organization, their equipment, their preparation, and the ability to put multiple drivers in competitive cars. The other major storyline coming out of Chicagoland for the Riley Series is the battle to make the postseason field. With only a handful of races remaining before Chase field is set, every point matters. Taylor Gray had an exceptionally strong night. He led 55 laps, he finished 7th, and he strengthened his position above the cutoff line. Brent Cruz also had a productive day. He currently sits in the final Chase-eligible position as well. But the pressure is increasing. One of the biggest disappointments for the night was William Sawalich. Sawalich was already fighting for his playoff position. Then contact with teammate Brent Cruz happened, sent him spinning through the infield grass. The result from that is a 29th place finish, and now his road to postseason becomes even more difficult. Listen, the return to Chicagoland was a success, and honestly, this race is a reminder of why tracks like this matter. Not every race needs to be a street course. Not every race needs a gimmick. Sometimes you just have drivers battling on a challenging track, and that's what we saw Saturday night with the O'Reilly Series, and that's just good racing. Now, if Saturday night was about breakthrough victory for a young star proving himself, Sunday night was about one of the biggest teams putting on a clinic. The Cup Series returned to Chicagoland. Joe Gibbs Racing had one of the most dominant finishes of the entire season, so let's just dive right into that one next. We're going to move into our final piece of our massive weekend of racing recap, if you will. A little longer legged on this one, but after we saw everything at Silverstone, Mid-Ohio, and Saturday night with the O'Reilly Series race, NASCAR Cup Series closed out the weekend with one of the biggest stories of the season, and that's their return to Chicagoland Speedway, and the story of a driver who's been knocking on the door all year finally breaking through. Chase Briscoe is a NASCAR Cup Series winner once again this season, and this one might have been one of the most meaningful victories of career for him. But before we talk about the winner, we have to talk about the track, because the return to Chicagoland Speedway is one of the biggest stories coming into the weekend. The facility had not hosted a NASCAR Cup Series race since 2019. For years, fans have debated whether Chicagoland belonged back on the schedule, and after Sunday night, I think NASCAR has a pretty clear answer. Yes, it does. Chicagoland proved exactly what intermediate track racing should provide. Multiple grooves, tire management, green flag runs, strategy, drivers searching for grip, and a final battle that came down to teammates fighting for the win. This wasn't a race decided by a gimmick. This wasn't a race decided by a late restart lottery. It was decided by execution, and that's what fans want. So let's talk about Chase Briscoe, because this has been a season of frustration and opportunity. When Briscoe moved to Joe Gibbs Racing, expectations were super high. He was joining one of NASCAR's elite organizations. He had the equipment, he had the resources, but sometimes a driver can have everything they need and still have to wait for that first breakthrough. Sunday, Chicagoland was definitely a good moment for him. The number 19 Toyota wasn't necessarily the car everyone expected to win. Briscoe admitted afterwards the weekend didn't start perfectly for them. He struggled in practice. He didn't feel like he had a dominant car. This is just where great teams separate themselves and they adjust. They communicate and they find a way. And that's exactly what Briscoe and crew chiefs Justin Small did, because the turning point came with the final green flag pit cycle when William Byron had one of the strongest cars all night. In fact, Byron won both opening stages. He looked like a legitimate favorite to win, but on lap 215, Briscoe made his move. He came to pit road first, got a little bit of undercut on him. Byron followed a lap later, and that one lap difference changed everything. Briscoe gained the track position that he needed. When the final green flag run began, he was a car everyone had to catch, and from there, it became a battle of survival. Briscoe had Christopher Bell behind him, and Bell was definitely not going away in that teammate Toyota of his. This is honestly one of the best parts of the race, because the final laps featured two teammates fighting for the win, similar to what we were just talking about with IndyCar, but Briscoe in the 19, Bell in the number 20, both of them being the Toyota Camrys, both Joe Gibbs Racing, both championship caliber drivers, but only one can win, right? Bell closed the gap. He was faster in certain sections, and he was searching his way around for some more grip and some more traction, but Chicagoland is not an easy place to pass, and dirty air played a huge role. As Bell got closer, his car started to lose some of the handling bounce he needed. He could see Briscoe, he could smell the wind, but he couldn't complete the pass. Briscoe crossed the finish line just 0.276 seconds ahead of Bell, a margin of victory that shows how close the race really was. And for Christopher Bell, this was another painful second-place finish, and honestly, you could feel the frustration from him. Bell has been one of the fastest drivers in the Cup Series this season. He's led 417 laps total. He's been in position to win multiple times, and he continues to just find himself just a little bit short. After the race, Bell joked that he was just becoming a second-place driver. Obviously, that's frustration speaking, but it highlights the reality of his season so far. At this level, being close isn't enough. Bell has the speed, he has the talent, and he has a team. When will the breakthrough happen? Because eventually the frustration can turn into motivation too, right? When Bell starts stacking wins, watch out. While Briscoe was celebrating and Bell was disappointed, Joe Gibbs Racing was celebrating an incredible team performance because the final finishing order was first place, Chase Briscoe; second place, Christopher Bell; third place, Denny Hamlin; a JGR 1, 2, 3, and that's extremely rare to get all three on the podium. It just showed how strong Toyota was at Chicagoland. 7 Toyota drivers finished inside the top 10, by the way, and that is complete total dominance from that manufacturer. For Denny Hamlin, a third-place finish was another strong points day, and while he wasn't the winner, he continues to show why he remains one of the smartest championship contenders in the sport. Hamlin's ability to collect points on days when he isn't the fastest car is one of the biggest reasons that he remains alive every single season. One of the biggest what-if stories, though, was William Byron, because for much of the race, he looked like the guy to beat. We talked about he won both stages. He led 91 laps. He had the speed, but the final pit cycle changed the race. After Briscoe gained that advantage, Byron couldn't recover. He still finished fourth, and that's important because it's another reason why Byron showing championship level consistency, but just not the day he wanted, right? Let's talk a little mid-pack drama for a second. Cup Series race wasn't just about the leaders. There were several important storylines throughout the field. Alex Bowman had one of the strongest races of recent weeks when he finished fifth. This is a major momentum boost after a difficult stretch for him. Bubba Wallace in sixth, Ryan Blaney in seventh, Ty Gibbs in eighth, Corey Heim continued to impress with a top 10 finish. Riley Herbst also in the top 10, 23-11 really getting things done as well. Before the final battle, though, at Chicagoland, they delivered plenty of drama there. The opening stage saw several incidents. You had Ryan Preece involved in an early crash with Eric Jones. Connor Zilic making another Cup Series start, trying to avoid incident, but ended up hitting the inside wall. Frustrating stretch for that young driver. Zilic has shown flashes of impressive speed, but consistency has been very difficult for him and that team. Another storyline involves Carson Hocevar and Zane Smith. Contact between the two drivers sent both into the wall. The incident renewed a rivalry that has been developing over some time, and then the biggest one probably for me of the race was the Austin Hill and SVG incident. Contact between those drivers created another controversial moment. Hill believes contact was intentional, especially considering their recent race history inside Pocono and Coronado. Whether intentional or not, it added another layer of drama to an even more eventful night. We got to talk about one of the biggest things in the championship, though, right now, and that's Tyler Reddick. Reddick entered the weekend with one of the strongest drivers in the series, but once again, bad luck struck. After running well, Reddick suffered damage after reportedly running over debris from another car. The damage forced him behind the wall and continued a frustrating stretch that he's had the last few races. This is now another race where Reddick lost valuable momentum due to circumstances outside of his control, and that is something to watch moving forward because when Reddick is good, he's very good, but championships are won by surviving the bad days, right? All right, we've talked a lot about racing so far this episode. Let's break down all 4 races. Let's talk about the biggest winners and biggest disappointments from the weekend. Big winners, Arrow McLaren. That one's easy. Historic 1-2 finish. 2 drivers battling for victory in IndyCar. Big winner, Ferrari over there with Charles Leclerc getting the win at the British Grand Prix. 1-2-3 Cup finish for Joe Gibbs Racing. Another big winner there. Biggest surprise of the weekend, probably Brandon Jones beating out Chase Elliott for the historic battle there at Chicagoland in the O'Reilly Series race. Toughest weekend award definitely goes to Kimi Antonelli. He had a rough one, and also probably tie that up with Tyler Reddick. But what a weekend of racing. 4 races, 4 completely different series. Formula One reminded us why Silverstone is such a great venue. IndyCar showed why aggressive competitive racing is heart of the series. NASCAR proved that historic tracks still have a place in modern schedule, and that's why we love motorsports, people. I mean, every weekend creates new stories. A driver can go from struggling to celebrating. A championship favorite can suddenly face adversity. A team can announce a massive future lineup in one day, which we're going to talk about here in just a minute, and then prove it on track the next. So, yeah, if the season's far from over, as we see any indication, the second half of racing calendar is going to get pretty incredible. Stick with us to the end. We got a great history segment coming up. But first, let's dive right into some silly season stuff because we don't have to speculate anymore. The biggest domino in IndyCar Silly season has officially fallen. Arrow McLaren announced the 2027 lineup, and I think it's safe to say this is one of the boldest moves we've seen in modern-day IndyCar. The team has officially confirmed that Pato Ward will be staying on. They're going to bring over Scott Dixon, and Felix Rosenquist will make his return and make up the full-time three-car lineup beginning in 2027. On top of that, Ryan Hunter-Reay will return once again to drive a fourth entry for the Indy 500 while continuing in his role as sporting director. So what started as a rumor just a few days ago has now become reality, and now the real fun begins because this announcement doesn't just answer questions, it creates a lot of new ones. Let's just start with Scott Dixon. For nearly a quarter of a century, Scott Dixon and Chip Ganassi Racing were practically inseparable. 25 seasons together, 6 IndyCar championships, Indy 500 victory, dozens of race wins, one of the greatest driver-team partnerships the sport has ever seen. Most of us assumed Scott Dixon would retire wearing Ganassi colors. Instead, he's taking on what may be a final and perhaps most intriguing challenge of his Hall of Fame career. And personally, I kind of like this move. I don't know that it's going to be as successful and all the hype as people think it is, but some fans think he should have finished his career at Ganassi. I understand that point of view for sure, but I also think there's something exciting about seeing one of the greatest drivers in IndyCar challenge himself in a completely different environment. He's already proven everything there is to prove. This isn't about adding legacy. This is about writing one final chapter, and there's one driver capable of immediately making a championship impact with a new team. It's Scott Dixon. Then there's Felix Rosenqvist. His return to Arrow McLaren is fascinating. Remember, Felix already knows many people from inside that organization. He raced there before. He understands the culture. He understands the engineering group. Since leaving McLaren, he's arguably becoming a more complete driver. He's matured. He's become more consistent. And this season has reminded everyone how fast he really is. Bringing him backside along Dixon gives McLaren two incredible experienced drivers who know exactly how to develop race cars over a long season. That's a luxury few teams have. Of course, one constant remains, and that's Pato O'Ward. If there was ever any doubt Arrow McLaren sees Pato as a cornerstone of his future, this announcement erased it. Instead of replacing him, they're surrounding him with experience, a 6-time series champion, an Indy 500 winner, 2 Indy 500 winners technically. That's an incredible amount of knowledge entering the same engineering meetings every single weekend. I honestly think this lineup makes everyone better. It definitely is sharpening iron. But here's where the story gets really interesting. Every blockbuster signing creates a ripple effect, right? This one was created somewhat of a tidal wave because 2 current Arrow McLaren drivers are now officially looking for new homes in 2027. You had Christian Lundgaard, who's probably the MVP of free agents at the moment, and Nolan Siegel. So let's start with Lundgaard because if I'm a team owner looking to strengthen my lineup, he's at the top of the list. He's young, he's winning races, he's proven he can qualify at the front. He's one of the most consistent performers of the season against guys like Alex Palou, and quite honestly, I don't think Lundgaard stays unemployed for very long. In fact, if I had to make one prediction today, I'd say he's the favorite to land Scott Dixon's old seat at Chip Ganassi Racing. This is just me speculating, right? This isn't anything official, but it makes a tremendous amount of sense. Ganassi needs someone who can win immediately. Lundgaard fits that description perfectly, and several respected paddock observers already see him as the logical favorite. Then there's Nolan Siegel. This is a tougher situation. He's incredibly young. He's shown fashions of speed, but with a lineup suddenly featuring Dixon, Rosenqvist, and O'Ward, McLaren simply chose proven experience over long-term development. That's the harsh reality of professional motorsports. Sometimes talent isn't enough. Sometimes timing works against you. I don't think we've seen the last of Nolan Siegel in IndyCar. The question is where he lands. Another move that became official recently is Marcus Armstrong staying with Meyer-Shank Racing and moving into the number 60 car for 2027, which is their primary car, right? If they were to do them as a 1 and 2, that 60 car is the number 1 car and 66 is the number 2 car. I actually think this is one of the most underrated stories of the silly season because Armstrong has steadily improved over the last few years. He's becoming more confident, more consistent, and now he gets the opportunity to become one of the centerpieces for MSR's future. While everyone is talking about Scott Dixon at Arrow McLaren, Armstrong quietly secured what has become one of the most important seats in the grid over the next several seasons. Now let's go back to Chip Ganassi for a second, because honestly, they're now the biggest mystery in IndyCar. How do you replace a Scott Dixon? Well, the truth is you don't. You replace the seat. You don't replace the driver. Scott Dixon helped define the organization for a generation. Whoever climbs in that car next needs to inherit some enormous expectations. If it is Christian Lundgaard, I think Ganassi will be getting one of the very best young talents available. If it's someone else, they're walking into one of the biggest opportunities and the biggest pressure situations in the entire paddock. So what does all of this tell us? Well, to me, it says something we've been watching develop over the last several years, and that's IndyCar's driver market has become super aggressive. Teams aren't afraid to make difficult decisions. Veteran stars aren't afraid to change organizations. Championship caliber drivers are willing to leave comfortable situations if they believe another opportunity gives them a better chance to win in the series. And that's healthy for the series as a whole, honestly. It creates storylines, it creates rivals, and it gives fans something to debate long before the green flag drops at St. Petersburg next season. I don't know. Here's a big takeaway, though. Arrow McLaren didn't just sign Scott Dixon. They made a statement. They looked around the paddock and said, we're done being the team that's close. We're building the team that's expected to win championships. That's exactly what this lineup says to me. This is a huge shot from Tony Kanaan and Ryan Hunter-Reay. I mean, Dixon brings one of the greatest racing minds IndyCar has ever seen into a whole batch of new equipment with, some would say, unlimited funding. Rosenqvist brings speed, confidence, and momentum. Pato remains one of the most naturally gifted drivers in the series. The fast hands he's got on him are incredible. On paper, this may be the strongest driver lineup heading into 2027, but championships aren't won on paper. Now the pressure shifts squarely onto Arrow McLaren, because with this much talent, anything less than contending for both the Indy 500 and the NASCAR Cup feel like a disappointment. One thing's for certain, the biggest domino has fallen. Now it's time to see where the rest of the paddock falls. We're definitely going to keep following this story, without a doubt. And yeah, I mean, good luck to all the other teams. That's all I can say. All right, our favorite time of the episode. We've been hyping this one up a bit, and this one's such a cool story to me. So when you think about the greatest names in motorsports, we usually think about the championship victories and legendary rivalries. Talk about Richard Petty's, the Mario Andretti, AJ Foyt, Fangio, Ayrton Senna, all these guys coming to mind. But today, we're going to talk about someone whose greatest victory didn't even happen on the racetrack. Instead, it happened on the highways that we travel around the world. If you've ever driven down the interstate, exited onto a freeway, or noticed those yellow crash barrels protecting bridge supports and highway ramps, you've benefited from the work of one man. His name was John Fitch. He was a fighter pilot, a prisoner of war, a Le Mans winner, one of America's greatest sports car drivers, and an automotive engineer, and arguably one of the most important people in motorsports history, not because of how many races he won, but because of how many lives he helped save. This is the remarkable story of John Fitch. Before he ever climbed into a race car, John Fitch had already lived an extraordinary life. Born in Indianapolis, Indiana in 1917, he developed a fascination with machinery at an early age. Like many young men of his generation, he loved speed, he loved airplanes, automobiles. Those interests would eventually shape into the rest of his life. By the late 1930s, Europe was descending into war when the United States entered World War II and the attack on Pearl Harbor. John Fitch joined the United States Army Air Forces. He trained as a fighter pilot and eventually flew the legendary P-51 Mustangs over Europe. Flying combat missions was one of the most dangerous jobs in the war. Every flight carried the possibility that it could be your last. John flew dozens of combat missions before. In 1944, his aircraft was shot down behind enemy lines. He survived the crash, but survival was only the beginning. He was captured by German forces. Fitch spent the remainder of the war as a prisoner of war. Imagine that for a moment. Years before becoming an international racing star, John Fitch endured one of the harshest experiences imaginable. When the war finally ended in 1945, he returned home with a completely different perspective on life. Many veterans struggled to reconnect with civilian life. Fitch found his outlet through speed. Like many racers of post-war era, he started with whatever cars he could afford. Road racing in America was still in his infancy. Sports car racing wasn't as polished and professional environment that we know today. Drivers often raced the same cars they drove to the track. Mechanics worked under trees. Trailers were homemade. Teams were tiny, but the competition was fierce. John's natural talent became obvious almost immediately. He wasn't simply fast. He was analytical. He understood what a car was doing beneath him. He could communicate with engineers, he could improve equipment, and that combination would define his entire career. By the early 1950s, Mercedes-Benz noticed this was significant because Mercedes wasn't just another manufacturer, they represented the pinnacle of racing engineering. Their racing program was filled with legendary names including Fangio and Sterling Moss. For an American driver to earn a place alongside those stars, it was incredibly rare. John Fitch became Mercedes-Benz leading American driver, driving machines like the famous 300 SL, and later the incredible 300 SLR. Fitch represented America on some of the biggest stages in international motorsport. One of the defining moments of his career came in 1955. That year, Mercedes entered the 24 Hours of Le Mans with one of the strongest teams ever assembled. Everything looked promising, then disaster struck. On the evening of June 11th, 1955, driver Pierre Levay, Mercedes, became airborne after contact with another car. It crashed into the spectator area at tremendous speed. The result remains one of the deadliest accidents in motorsports history. More than 80 spectators lost their lives that day. Hundreds more were injured. John Fitch wasn't involved in the crash itself, but he was there. He witnessed the tragedy unfold. Imagine spending your life around racing and suddenly realizing the sport you love can inflict unimaginable devastation, not only on drivers, but to innocent fans. Mercedes withdrew from the race. Soon afterwards, the company left factory motorsports entirely. For decades, for many drivers, this event became another tragic chapter in racing history. For John Fitch, it became something else entirely. It became a mission. He continued racing successfully. In 1955, he won his class at the 24 Hours of Le Mans. He claimed victories in Sebring 12 hours. He won races throughout Europe and North America. He competed against many of the greatest drivers of the sport has ever known, but something changed. The engineer inside him became the most important thing of his racing career. Throughout the late 1950s and into 1960s, Fitch began asking questions very few people were asking. Why do race cars keep crashing the same way? Could barriers absorb energy instead of simply stopping cars? Why were roadside obstacles so unforgiving? At the time, most guardrails and concrete structures were designed to only protect the roadway. Very little thought had gone into protecting the people inside the vehicle. John believed engineering, not luck, should determine survival. That philosophy led him to develop one of the most influential highway safety innovations ever created, and that's the Fitch barrier. You have almost certainly seen one. Picture a freeway exit where a bridge support or concrete divider sits directly in front of traffic. Instead of leaving the obstacle exposed, engineers often place a long row of bright yellow barrels in front of it. Those barrels aren't just filled with random materials, they're carefully engineered energy absorbers. As the vehicle strikes them, each barrel absorbs part of the crash's energy. Instead of coming to a violent stop against cold concrete, the vehicle slows progressively. That dramatically reduces the force experienced by the occupants of the vehicle. It's a beautifully simple concept. Take an unavoidable impact, stretch it over a longer distance, reduce the force, increase the chances of survival. Today, versions of that system exist all over the world. Millions of drivers have passed them without even knowing who invented the concept of it, and that was John Fitch who did. His work didn't stop there, though. He designed safer guardrails, safer race circuits, impact attenuation systems, runoff improvements, crash protection concepts that would influence both public roads and motorsports. He worked with governments, automobile manufacturers, engineers, safety organizations, anyone willing to improve transportation safety. He wasn't interested in receiving credit. He just wanted the results. Ironically, some people criticized him. There were those who believed safer roads would encourage reckless driving. Others felt the costs were too high. John remained focused on the evidence. Every improvement that reduced crash forces meant more families made it home, and for him, the math was simple. Even while becoming one of America's leading safety advocates for automotive transportation, he never lost his love for racing. He continued competing, mentoring young drivers, and promoting sports car series across the United States. He helped build the reputation of American road racing during its formative years. Many historians remember him as one of the key figures who elevated sports car racing in America during the 50s and 60s. His accomplishments earned him recognition at nearly every major motorsport organization. He was inducted in the Motorsports Hall of Fame of America, the Sports Car Club of America Hall of Fame, Corvette Hall of Fame, Sebring Hall of Fame, and numerous engineering and safety organizations honored him for his contributions extending far beyond competition. John Fitch passed away in 2012 at the age of 95. By then, millions of people had benefited from his life's work without ever realizing it. Every time a race car safely slows into a modern runoff area, every time an impact attenuator cushions a freeway crash, every time engineers think about absorbing energy instead of resisting it, they're following principles John Fitch helped decades in developing. Racing has always pushed technology forward: disc brakes, fuel injection, aerodynamics, composite materials. Many of those innovations eventually reached everyday drivers, but perhaps no racer has given back more to ordinary people than John Fitch. He proved that greatness isn't measured only by trophies, but sometimes it's measured by the lives that you never meet, the people who walk away from crashes because someone decades earlier refused to accept that tragedy was just simply part of driving. John Fitch may have never become a household name, but his legacy is everywhere. It's on racetracks, it's on highways, it's in every major journey that ends safely because one racer believed engineering could save lives. That's a legacy few championships can match. And with that, we're going to close out the show today. We greatly, greatly appreciate you listening, especially if you made it this far with us. History segment's our favorite part every week. We got some exciting stuff coming up. We might have a sponsor on board here soon. A couple other things. Please continue to listen. Share with a friend. Share with a motorsports fan, podcast fan, racing fan, you name it. Just hit all the buttons, like, share, subscribe this episode, follow us on all the socials, do all the stuff, all the things. You know what to do. You hear this on everything you listen to, right? But we appreciate it. Thanks again for tuning in this week. What a week we got. Got a few things coming up this week. Not quite as exciting as this last episode. Probably won't be quite as long. This one's a little bit longer than our normal, but yeah. We'll end it here. Appreciate the listen. We'll see you next time. Until then, stay safe. Thanks for tuning in.